Hello and welcome to Climb's podcast series Advancing Vietnam with me Vlad Savin as your host. Throughout the following episodes, we're looking to answering relevant questions about doing business in Vietnam. What are the opportunities and challenges faced by investors entering the market or existing players in major industries? We will seek to understand the business environment from a cultural, local mindset and how to deal with compliance from an international perspective. What are the major risks faced by businesses active in the region and how to overcome them? We will dive deep into the compliance environment in Vietnam, discussing processes and procedures, changes in laws, latest official updates from the authorities, and financial governance planning for businesses active in Vietnam. We at Climb consider compliance a major asset for foreign investors operating in Vietnam. We emphasize this aspect when speaking with our clients, and we make sure they understand the significant benefits of being compliant. In this episode, I'm discussing with Matthew Lowry, managing partner at Acclaim Vietnam, about the challenges foreign investors faced this year during the extensive lockdown period and some of the case studies and creative solutions they adopted to sustain their operations, and also how 2022 can enable forward-thinking investors to tap into the growth potential of the Vietnamese market. Matthew, welcome to our 19th episode of Advancing Vietnam podcast series, and I look forward to this foreign investor focused discussion as we're coming to an end for a very difficult year for many businesses in Vietnam. 2022 will certainly be extensively important for the economic growth of the country and foreign investor sentiment and trust in the Vietnamese growth story.
Great to be here and look forward to the podcast.
Matthew, many companies active in Vietnam were impacted by the current COVID-19 situation and faced structural and operational complications. What sectors were highly affected by the pandemic, and what were some of the significant challenges investors had to face and resolve?
Yeah, thanks, Vlad. If we look at 2021, we can look at it in those who were impacted, those who, just pretty much everyone in Vietnam, those who thrived, and those who really didn't pull through, haven't pulled through to the extent that the impact has been significant. So if I was going to look at across the year, we had quarter two in the north, Bac Yang and those sort of provinces that were hit significantly. The manufacturing, the Samsung plants, etc. were badly hit. Quarter three is where you're sort of alluding to, where the south, Ho Chi Minh City, sort of the commercial powerhouse, was decimated in the lockdown and what it did. So we saw GDP growth in Ho Chi Minh City alone decreased 25% in Q3. Now, that's a significant hit. Manufacturing, as much as this 3-in-1, which was a situation where you could have staff living in the factories and working and living, eating, working all in one location to reduce COVID spread, it's arguable whether it was successful, but there's plenty of examples that it was not a solution which impacted a lot on productivity. Not many companies could meet the requirements, and it was very difficult. So we saw manufacturing significantly impacted, but it rebounded, and it's interesting what has come from that. We saw retail sector again decimated in the south. In the centre, less so. In the north, there was less of an impact, but in the south, retail was decimated. And what it meant was that this moved to e-commerce, but that's been a delayed effect. Even supermarkets who were open and the only real business open during the pandemic suffered dramatically because they couldn't sell the normal range of stock. In fact, there were staff in their board in the supermarkets where they could not service customers, had to follow the government requirements. And so those that you think may have done well didn't. So it was across the board. That said, you did have, during that quarter three lockdown, you did see service companies move to this work from home, and many of them successfully. So those doing IT development, those doing just a general broad services sector, that work from home, which had been sort of started, we first did that in April 2020, there was a readiness for it, and it just happened. So we saw that services sector was not impacted. Everyone else was impacted, but we have seen some interesting things in Q4, and just on some of those things of what's come out of it and where things are going. It's quite an interesting scenario. So yeah, it hurt pretty much everyone, and that's still hurting. For a lot of those, are still hurting now.
That's true. And probably what helped is that resilience being one of the key attributes of the Vietnamese culture, it became a powerful strength as well in the business environment. In addition to have that resilient mindset, what is, in your opinion, what are leadership strategic tools investors use to overcome these challenges and leverage on their strengths in the future?
The businesses that did work from home and work and not just, we'll just stop operating, were a lot of the foreign invested sectors. That was just a default because they'd seen other countries. A lot of the locals who had that international mindset of it's a challenge. It's just a challenge. A good thing is, we saw it in our business as well. People just took it in their stride. If you culturally said, "Yep, we're behind you. We're going to continue," and that cultural approach to how you run your business, people just accepted that. Yes, it's COVID. Part of that comes back to the Vietnamese government approach of being open at the start, communicating, sharing a message, and we don't have this anti-vax, this "where's my freedoms," explicit sort of pushback against the government. Now, so people accepted that things were tough and accepted that restrictions were in place, and as a result, you haven't got this fight or flight approach. You've got this: how do we take advantage of it? So we saw businesses move to work from home. We saw some of the 3-in-1s, 3 in place, successful or not. We saw new approaches. We saw this focus on technology, moving, saying, "Hey, we've got to adapt. We've always meant to do it. Now we have to do it. We've got no choice." And that sort of, we're going to get through it approach. And that is back to your question of resilience. It's an innate nature of Vietnamese, but as a leader, you need to bring it out. So leadership, culturally using those attributes, you don't get pushback. You actually get support. You get, yes, we're in this together. And that resilience, that teamwork, that it's not us against them, it's we're all together, did enable quite a lot of success stories coming out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about that a bit later. For now, the GDP projected growth for 2021 was about 2%, which is significantly lower than the initial goals and expectations of the government. However, looking at the investor sentiment in business in Vietnam in general, in your opinion, do you think it diminished in 2021?
Depending when you asked me, I would have given a different question. So coming to the end of Q3, where there was 9 weeks of hard lockdown in Ho Chi Minh City and southern provinces, I was concerned that we were as a country going to break the foreign investor confidence in Vietnam. Supply chains were broken, manufacturing wasn't happening, and the countries that were relying on Vietnam, the companies, it was a question whether that trust was broken. Luckily, what's happened is that October, for many manufacturers, was their biggest month ever. The productivity gain they got out of their staff. So we still have staff shortages in factories, but the reopening of factories in the south and the southern areas with less staff producing more than they ever produced really bounced this back up. The deliveries got out, things started moving. Also, the manufacturing side, when they went to go to other markets, there was not capacity. They couldn't go back to China. China has their own constraints of power issues. Central America and Southern America and other parts of Asia. So all of a sudden it was, well, okay, the Vietnamese manufacturers had a tough time, but they've pulled through. And look what they've done in October. And they're not saying no. They're going to come through. So we saw that, meaning that this opportunity of whether we fell off a cliff or whether we just took a trough and bounced back up, it looks like the bouncing's there. That said, we still see reticence in the retail. We don't see the retail confidence where people are going out and just go to the shopping centre and buy some things. We're not seeing that. Okay, online's booming, but those who are bricks and mortar, the F&B is still stalled. You've still got restrictions on capacity. You've got bars and massage karaoke not open yet and open and shut. You have constraints, and it's a provincial by provincial constraint. In Ho Chi Minh City here, which is economically the largest, that's, I think, is sort of the bellwether of the country in many ways, looking at it, because a lot of foreign investors come through Ho Chi Minh City. And that 25% decline I mentioned is also will have a bounce back of a similar margin in this quarter. So 2%, we're still going to be down in quarter 3, quarter 4. We were up in the quarter 1, quarter 2, but it's not a downward approach. It is that upward curve has come through, and I wasn't sure it was going to be there, but we do have that. And if you just keep in context that 75% plus of manufacturing is foreign invested, the sector that exports out of Vietnam, and from a sentiment perspective, on an inbound sentiment, manufacturing and export is probably the best guide.
That's true. As with any challenging situation, there's also a silver lining which can be leveraged if you adapt fast enough to the changing environment. And this has a twofold meaning for Vietnamese businesses. Firstly, investors had to figure out how to change and adapt their business models to the current situation. And in many cases, they ended up creating more value than before, strengthening their output, taking advantage of untapped potential in consumer channels like online, for example. Secondly, even though many of the business sectors experienced a slowdown, as you said before, some of the market verticals thrived and pivoted their operations. For instance, digital commerce and other digital businesses that were involved in the online area. Can you share a few examples, maybe from your experience with your clients, or how certain businesses pivoted their operations, and what industries, in your opinion, continued their growth in 2021?
Yeah, the growth, it's hard to say sort of continue their growth in some of them. If I just took the view of where they are now versus where they are before, particularly when it comes to e-commerce. So, and not just e-commerce, this digitalization of business, this movement to, and I was having a online discussion the other day about this significant pivot for what consumers want. They want instantaneous, that's part of the digital revolution, but they also want less face-to-face interface. They're after an app, they're after data in a different way. The comfort and the confidence in consumers has changed. So e-commerce is thriving, but also businesses that have traditionally been a paper-based service business are now becoming an app-based. The government is doing that. We're seeing a digitization. So the digitization and pushing people to do that has brought businesses out the other side. Some have been fine through the pandemic, some have dropped and have to restart, but it has forced change. And that's going to have a long-term benefit. That's really going to help them in the future, because for a lot of them, I've got some clients doing wholesale and retail distribution of certain products. They've been wanting to be an e-store, wanting to do B2B apps, wanting to do it. It forced them. They're doing it, and they're so much better off for it. Has it resulted in more profits? Not necessarily. Have they profited from it? No. But they've brought forward something they knew they had to do. It forced their hand, and they are better for it and happier for it. From manufacturing, we've seen supply chain. The supply chain issue was just as bad as the staffing and shutdown of individual factories was the actual supply chain. So we've now seen, we've still got some major supply chain issues. We're seeing people then not rely on one supplier, have diversity, seeking out others that they would not have otherwise. And we're seeing some manufacturers finding better and different things to enable production in a different way. We're seeing productivity gains. We're seeing focusing on wastage, etc. So the supply chains coming out of this in factories will arguably be better than they were before. We see the reliance will be different. Another thing just on that, where businesses are now adapting, is that we've seen some of the large groups that are focused in clusters say, we don't want to have too much focused in one cluster. We don't want more than, say, 30% of our global business in southern Vietnam. And by knowing that, it breaks the reliance on one customer too. Businesses now are looking to say, well, they're protecting risk, I'm going to protect risk, and building that into their whole process, both suppliers, customers, and building a more resilient business going forward. So it has less ability where global shocks will affect it less. It's forcing them, their business model change, to be resilient for the future and to have more success. So to your question of those who have thrived, not a lot of, I would say, has thrived, but the vast majority of businesses have come out of this better. Now, there are some closed, there are a lot of domestic F&B and other businesses have never reopened, it's killed them. But those who have come out of it, I would argue the vast majority are stronger and a better business model than they had before.
Mm-hmm. And as well, the government supported different initiatives as well for international businesses and local. And going through that, let's understand a bit about what authorities did in the last, let's say, 6 to 8 months, and what kind of incentives they put in place to support businesses active in Vietnam. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the government last year in 2020 put some pretty broad tax incentives, but they were fairly broad. They were not so focused incentives. This year, they've tried to be a bit more focused. The incentives can be broken into both employment incentives and also then business sector incentives. The employment, they've decreased certain insurance costs that the company pays as part of their insurance contributions. They've reduced those. They've reduced the cost of employees to employers. So they're trying to make sure the employment is protected by reducing costs. They're not significant. It's a few percentage points on top of the cost, but it is a cost reduction. They've also enabling employees to make claims against the government, and enabling claims and refunds too means that employees have got cash and therefore they're supporting the economies and supporting those without jobs. They're trying to balance the employment side and protect the employees or those who are no longer employees. From the company side, so that's, even though the company directed part of that, it's to protect the employment. You've then got tax breaks. The tax breaks are more focused. So there's certain sectors, like for travel, they've decreased the VAT and they've decreased corporate international travel companies, whether there's much travel happening, but they've got a very focused on some. They have on small businesses or businesses of a certain size that have had reductions in revenues based on the last 2 years. They're getting a 30% tax break again this year. And there's certain incentives that are tax driven, which is based on those who are impacted. Large businesses are excluded from that though. So it really is looking at the smaller and medium size in many ways. And then you've got, within the company side, they've also got the access to loans. They've tried to push out loans to small, medium businesses who need a support, and they need to make ability to access low interest or interest-free loans from the government. That has not been so easy to access, and if you've ever done borrowing in Vietnam, it's difficult at the best of times, let alone trying to borrow through a government program. It's not the easiest, so it's not something that has been effective or efficient in getting money into the hands. I should have mentioned as well, there were deferrals of like labour trade union contributions. There are deferrals, there are a range of deferrals as well. I look less at those as being beneficial because you still have to pay them. So deferrals are there, but when I don't see them, there's still a cash impact and there's still a cash cost in any deferrals of those. But it can help from a cash perspective, but it's not long term. They're just more shorter term opportunities. So to wrap it up for companies, the government doesn't have deep pockets, and it has not put huge amounts, but there are some focused incentives and abilities. Now, there's a lot more and detail. So on our website, there's actually some nice summaries of some of the incentives that have been released in about 3 different packages across the last 6 to 9 months.
And do you think the government will continue forward with 2022 with supporting businesses with different incentives, or do you think this is their maximum bell?
No, I think there's more. So one of the credits I will give the government, they haven't just gone all out and just dumped everything in one go. It is about cautious. It is a planned approach, and definitely the 2022 there'll be a further round, because I think they're doing it in a way so they have got the ability to fund it, and they know that 2022 is still going to be a challenge. We're hopeful that it's going to be great, but there's no guarantee. It's an unpredictable world. So I think the government has got something in the back pockets, and they are looking not just this year. So, for example, another obscure incentive is those in the travel sector who require a certain amount of deposit for their travel insurance scheme, effectively, have got that reduced, and a significantly less amount they need to keep in the bank for the next 12 months. So they're looking into the future, and they're already putting things in place, knowing that it's going to take a while to build back impacted businesses back to where it was. Like the domestic consumption will take a while to get back to where it was.
And just to diverge a bit, you spoke quite a lot about travel, and you had the discussion with Ken Atkinson just a few weeks ago. What's your opinion about the travel sector and moving forward? And from what you understand as well from Ken, who has quite a lot of experience in this.
Yeah, there's been a lot of feedback on that, and people sort of looking, and because it wasn't as rosy as a lot of people go, oh, we can bounce back. Ken was talking normality 2024 to 2026 because of you're resetting a whole world that just stopped international travel, and in Vietnam in the last 4 months stopped domestic travel. You're resetting. You've lost. If you want tour guides and travel companies, they haven't worked as tour guides or foreign tourists for 18 months. They've got other jobs. You've got to bring that back. Are people going to travel? Are they scared? Are they confident with their travel arrangements? There's so many elements of that. I'm very comfortable with Ken's opinion that 2024 to 2026 to get back to normality, and that requires a rebuilding up, a retraining the workforce, the re-establishment of norms of travel, of visas, of confidence of foreign parties to want to travel. Because the last thing they want is let's get back on a plane, I get stuck in a foreign country for another 6 months and I can't get home. That fear, right or wrong, will exist for some time.
And coming back to 2022, which is right around the corner, the latest opening of the business operations in the major economical hubs here in Vietnam suggests that the government consistently seeks to attract new international investors and projects. How do you see the investor sentiment for 2022? And what kind of projects do you expect to see entering the market? What industries to drive the economic growth?
So the foreign investors, it's fairly broad what they're looking at, but as I said before, 75 or thereabout percent of the exports of foreign investment. I don't think that's going to change. What we're seeing is that foreign investors have seen upset globally. They've seen the confusion in the world trade. They've gone through waves, and it's gone through different countries at different times. Vietnam was more recent. Europe and the US, it was really 2020, not a 2021 major upset. And they've worked through the supply chains. They've worked through this disruption. So as I said earlier, we got out of this, it went deep, but we got out of it fast enough on the upswing that I don't think it had a significant long-term fundamental issue for foreign investors. So I believe that it'll be fairly across the board. It will be investment. We're going to see some sectors get less investment. So some concentrated sectors where Vietnam has 50% of the world trade in something, those major participants are going to be quite scared in having all their eggs in some baskets because of this. When one country gets disrupted, too much of their business is disrupted. It's also opportunity because there's a lot of companies, businesses that are still very focused on China and concentrated, and that's a risk that they can't continue as well due to issues on a country level, both on a geopolitical but also on a supply chain. Therefore, there's opportunities for more moving out this sort of the China plus one. I think it's going to be China plus two as a minimum. And this, not just move a little bit out, I need to move significant chunks of my business out. We will see the resurgence of F&B. We'll see resurgence of the consumer-focused discretionary consumption businesses, and a lot of them are closed. A lot of the Vietnamese smaller, marginal profit businesses, the home businesses, they've given up. And is there an opportunity for foreign investors to come in and take space? Yes, there is. There's opportunities for that space. So there's opportunities, both domestic groups and foreign groups, to take and look after cheap real estate for opening something, taking a risk, where you may still see some domestic smaller operators burnt and scared to take that risk. Foreign investors can bring chains in, local investors can develop their chains and develop the businesses. So I think it's very broad, but it's not going to be for everyone. But the foreign sector itself, I don't think was damaged enough. I don't think it was impacted enough. And I think the opportunities will be, as we've seen in prior years, a fairly strong growth. And Vietnam has had that significant growth in recent years for foreign investment, which drives domestic, and that's what we want. So I'm positive 2022. I just don't have I wish I had the insight of what the hell's going to happen, because it's a strange time.
And speaking of FDI, at Acclaim you support international investors with their market entry, strategic structuring, operational advice for the country in general. You also discuss with them their long-term plans as well, understanding what they're looking to do in the market and their potential expansion in the region. Have you noticed any fundamental change in their long-term views and strategic goals in the market? And how do you think they are still committed in the Vietnamese economy?
Yeah, provided that their sector isn't suffering globally in it for different reasons, we're not seeing any view. We saw that negativity in lockdowns, in supply chain problems was tough. And that was where my risk was, I said earlier, that were we going to come out of it the right way? We're seeing opportunities where, in fact, we've seen businesses that were impacted have come out, opened up, and more orders. Instead of less orders, instead of orders being cancelled, we're seeing more orders. Because of that shift of, well, I can't trust certain markets, you guys have shown you've cared during the lockdown. You haven't wiped your hands of everything. You said, "We'll trust us. We'll get there." More orders are coming. So that resilience you mentioned earlier has that confidence that the foreign buyers have towards Vietnam manufacturing exists, and businesses can take advantage of that. So it is an opportunity for growth. It is opportunity because of this. Vietnam doesn't, only some sectors, it sort of represents a higher proportion of the world trade, and there's a lot of opportunity for new investment to take over. But the current businesses that are here, their orders are doing well. There are some businesses though, just as that their supply chain troubles are going to cause them issues. So there are businesses that have got access or stock will be better off than those who are struggling, because there are some supply chain breakages that have not recovered, and that is going to present a challenge for some particular sectors. We'll see Q1, how that comes out. So most of them are sort of pushing forward for the new year delivery, get everything produced, get these orders, and then deal with supply chain, everything in there. So Q1 is going to be interesting to see how the supply chain and what that impacts and what that means for 2022 production, investment, business growth. But I'm generally confident about manufacturing, export. I would say we're still going to be a little bit more deferred and delayed in respect of the F&B and those consumer services sectors, which may take a little while more to recover on a confidence basis.
And this brings to our last question to kind of wrap up this podcast, but also the year of that we just had with almost 20 podcasts already. And looking a bit more towards your personal experience, you've been in Vietnam almost 17 years already. Are you positive in 2022 as a general idea from your personal perspective and also your professional experience? And what do you think it will bring for the business environment?
I'm positive with an asterisk. I'm positive in that we've gone through, I believe we've gone through the worst of what we've gone through in Vietnam during 2021, other countries that was 2020, in different countries, different things. We're seeing resurgence in other countries. I think Vietnam's, the way we've gone through things, I'm confident that 2022 is going to be better than 2021. I'm confident that people have learned, and the resilience, to use that word again, is strong as a country, as a people, from what was gone through, and we're better at because of that. So the country has learnt a lot. As we said, the digitization, the change in practices, the protection in business models, I think is really going to give us a great foundation. There's the asterisk is we don't know what's going to happen with COVID and with the global side of things. It is an unknown. It's not that I'm negative. I just have it. Usually I'm confident in predicting the future. I've probably learned my lesson to be a little bit cautious with that. It's the unknown, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think businesses, a little bit of unknown, they react in a more,
faster, flexible.
They're flexible, they're faster, but they're also conscious of themselves. They're conscious of the risks. They're conscious of what's happening. They're not doing things which is sort of a stack of cards or let it fall down, we'll be fine there. So let's just be careful about that. I will finish off saying what I've seen from the venture capital, the private equity sector, they're all in Vietnam. They are definitely doing transactions. They're looking for the next round of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of that coming through. So I get, the impression I get is that it will be a good year for Vietnam. It'll be a good year in a range of areas. We've come off a low, we've learnt, we've changed, and other than the unpredictable that we just don't know with particularly the COVID situation, we're a better country, and business sector is better in 22 because of 2021, and that by itself should make us all comfortable and confident that Vietnam's in a good pace.
Matthew, thanks again for your practical insights. It was a pleasure having these podcasts with you for the last, I think, already 2 years. We started them early 2020, and looking forward to next year's podcast.
Fantastic, thank you. And this has been a great journey for us doing these podcasts, and more to come. Fantastic.
This completes our last podcast episode for the year, and I'd like to take this chance to thank again Matthew for his interesting and practical thoughts and conversations, and to our community for following our insights on the social media, podcast platforms, YouTube, and the business events that we're organizing. We will continue in the next year to deliver our practical expertise through Advancing Vietnam podcast series. We have a new project called the Climb Conversations. We can find it on YouTube as well. And we look forward to continue building the Vietnamese business story together. See you in January for a new episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much.